Hey guys, good news. I have my replacement chassis, which came with a whole motorbike. And I was fortunate enough to get it off a guy who had had enough of the project. Got halfway through rebuilding it and it was basically a basket of bits. And part of the basket of bits was this chassis and a whole nother motorbike. So I'm going to rebuild that in my spare hours between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning to sell, to fund the project. And I'll reuse this chassis for my project. And as you can see, it's an absolute monster. It comes off a Honda XLV750. They're actually a pretty rare motorbike. They're only made for 2 years. There was only ever 200 sold in Australia. And each year, so it's 400 bikes. And they're a really unusual shaft drive, like the BMWs, only way cheaper. They now call them the Honda Translap, which they've gone back to a chain drive, post-racing them from Paris to Dakar. Really interesting thing about this is that they are an air-cooled V-twin. Really massive motor. You can see the size of the cradle that the motor sits in. It actually accepts my battery pack sideways with room to spare. Really heavy motor, massively heavy. So the lesson I've learned is that to get it through the ADR design rules, no chassis modifications. Try not to adjust the gross vehicle mass. And basically do as little as you possibly can to anything on the bike outside of stock is the one. Trick is though, I'm still going to have to do FEA analysis, and this chassis is an absolute pain in the dick to do because of the nature of the way that it's made. It's basically all pressed sheet metal and then it's welded together, so I'm going to have to somehow mimic that in CAD. It's going to be an interesting one. And then do an FEA analysis on it. And then I'll have to build a little cradle for the battery pack that engages with the existing points on the chassis where the motor bolted up historically. So you can see down in here, there's bolt points for the motor. And that cradle will then mimic the stiffness of the original motor, because all motorbike chassis rely on the motor to some degree as a stress member, and it varies from design to design. So this one definitely relied on the original one as a stressed member, because you can see down here we've got this section that actually unbolts to let you drop the entire engine out of the frame. So you can see here I've got my battery charger tucked down in there. It's just sitting in there at the moment, just testing for fitness. So that's going to fit in there, no problem. And you can see that up in here, plenty of space in here to fit my motor controller. Absolutely butt tons of space down in here where the air cleaner was in the original one. So that's going to be really useful to tuck electronics away in. And I can fit my water pump in here. And my motor fits too, so I'll use the motor. That'll bolt straight to the original engine's right angle drive. There's a right angle drive on the original engine. I've got a spare engine that's stuffed, so I'll use that right angle drive. I'll adapt it to the motor, and then it'll go straight down in the shaft drive through universal joint, because this is a swing arm, and there's a shaft that travels down the center of the swing arm and then to a final drive which changes the direction and then onto a spline and in the back wheel. So we can see down here, so I've got a full rear swing arm and final drive assembly. So you can see there's the shaft would run through there, and this is where basically we've got something similar to a car diff. We've got 2 helical gears that changes the direction to join onto a spline which is on the back wheel. Interestingly, the Honda engineers are pretty clever. Like, you can still drop this entire back wheel out with the use of basically 2 bolts, one here and one on the other side. And it's just like any other motorbike where you drop a back wheel out. and you know, you got diff oil in the back, and shaft drive. So interestingly about this one, I mean, yes, I'm going to have some losses in gears and things like that, but I'm going to have absolutely no noise, no chain noise. So this bike will literally be silent as a bike with a belt drive on it, without the headaches of belts. So you can see that some forks there. So I managed to get all this stuff for free. Didn't cost me a penny, cost me a slab of beer. So pretty exciting. You know, the chassis is not as simple as my old chassis. It's also not as good looking. I mean, these welds like are just like, oh my god, like horrible. And like here I am having to do FEA analysis on this chassis in order to build a cradle which mimics the existing engine stiffness, which doesn't affect the frame stiffness. So I don't want to make the frame any more or less stiff is the aim of the game. And we've got welds like this. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, you just got to jump through those hoops, unfortunately. That's what the engineers require you to do nowadays. So yeah, it's going to be an absolute bugger to mimic up in CAD. We've got all these kind of weird details. I mean, this I'll just delete that because we don't need to do that in CAD, but I'll obviously have to keep the hole in there. Weird setup. So they brought the air intakes up through the chassis, and they've got the air cleaner system up in here, and they've got this massive fuel tank up on the top with this funny like snorkel on it for the fresh air intake, and then they got these, you know, huge air scoops in here that pull air into the back of the motor. So a really interesting design back in the day. I can tell you the other bike that it's almost complete. I've almost got it back together again now. Is they're so heavy, like so heavy. So they're 200 kilos dry. The motor itself is nearly 90 kilos with all the bells and whistles connected to it. So this is going to get a serious weight loss regime because my electric gear is actually going to be lighter. So I'm not going to have any problems with gross vehicle mass, GVM, and that's a benefit. And it reduces a whole heap of headaches for me and all the engineering piece. Upgrading, this is a 1980s model, whereas my old chassis was a 1960s model, so better suspension. It's got a full 4-link rear suspension. You know, we can get upgraded shocks and stuff. You know, we're talking much stiffer front forks. So we can see down here. You know, these are much more beefy than the original 1970 stuff. And interestingly enough, I can fit on a pair of modern upside down forks and they'll fit straight on there. So that's a pretty sweet upgrade. No engineering required for that. Yeah, so another weird thing too is they use the frame as the oil tanks. So, which actually fixes a whole headache for me because I can reuse the frame oil tanks for my coolant that I'm going to use to cool the motor and battery pack and controller, so I don't have to put coolant tanks in. And here's a nice nifty spot for my radiators to reject heat as well. So what's turned out is, you know, started as a, you know, you can't do this, basically everyone told me I can't do it, is starting to turn around to it's actually possible now. So I've had, you know, everyone I've spoken to said, you know, you can't do it, it's not doable, you know, what you're doing is crazy. But now I'm learning enough about how to get this through and all the rules that I think this is going to be my best shot at it. And if I can't do this, well, I've got a really expensive paperweight, which is a giant battery sitting there. So if anyone wants a 120 volt, very high performance battery, you know where to get onto me. You know, now next steps is mimic this. So I'm going to do a 3D scan, which will save me a bit of time. Then I've got to bring that into the solid space and then I've got to start doing some FEA modeling, and then start to work up a cradle. So I'll do a base chassis FEA model, make sure that the chassis is behaving like it needs to under given load scenarios. And then the next step after that will be put the cradle in, make sure it behaves the same, and off to the engineers to get a preliminary certification done on it, which means I can move ahead, and then can start to go into production for the cradle and get cracking, get myself a motorbike together. I've got all the bits sitting on the bench over here ready to drive. I've got a motor and I've got the power, so get some two wheels on there and get some power going. Probably a bit of design work to do down in here for this right angle here. I'm thinking, and again it's just a bit boring at this stage, but I'm thinking maybe incorporating the right angle drive, mounting of the motor into the cradle, all in one go, for this cradle. Otherwise there's going to be too many bits and bobs hanging around, so not sure. Let's see how it looks up in the CAD model. So I'll get the scan done and I'll start putting these bits in CAD, and see where it all lands and see what space I've got to play with, because the universal joint sits down in there, and then the right angle joint's pretty big. It will fill this whole space, so I don't really want to take too much more up, otherwise I'm going to be losing all this beautiful real estate that I've got. You know, I've got loads of real estate, which is like, oh my god, like look at all that in there. Unfortunately, a little bit of a redesign on this top plate for the battery box, because it was originally orientated the other way. So we can see over here, all of this junk up on the top was originally orientated for north-south orientation. I'm going to have to do east-west orientation, which means that the existing frame is going to run more or less right through the middle of here, which is not the end of the world, because funnily enough I built a fair bit of slack into these cables up here, because I had an inkling that I might need to do something like this. And you know, this guy over here is not even bolted down or anything. The main disconnect's probably my biggest headache, because that's got all of the main cable work that comes into the bottom of it from inside the battery down in here. So that's probably my biggest challenge, because that's not easy to relocate. Not impossible, but not easy. So, and also the coolant lines for the cold plate as well. So ideally they would want to come out of the back or out of the front, and then these contactors would need to come out to the edges probably. Anyway, I'm going to model it, because there is a little bit of space up here, you know, on each side. So let's just see, and also there's a little bit of space, you know, in underneath there as well. So you can see up in here, there's a bit of headroom in there, so maybe the main disconnect might fit in there as it sits, and then all the cables come out here. And then obviously I've got to redesign these front and back plates for different mounting configurations now as well. But that's, again, it's not the end of the world. It's not great, because it's just a bunch of wasted effort, and also a bit of wasted money in machining that I've fiddled, you know, time in machining those plates out in aluminium. But you know, I guess that's the name of the game, isn't it, really? So yeah, a bit of reconfiguration of this top chill plate, and some reconfiguration of the end plates, and maybe I've got this kick in here to clear the motor, or to originally clear the motor, but maybe I'll delete that kick depending on what I want to do there, because it's going to look a bit odd. Yeah, with the kick you know, this kick in the bottom in here to clear the motor, but nothing in the space. So anyway, I'll look at it in 3D and CAD. But yeah, that's my kind of ramblings and my thought patterns. But yeah, really exciting. Probably going to go with a totally different design now. I'm going to go, because we've got a much more angular chassis, so we're going to go some pretty brutal kind of design, futuristic sort of brutalism, which will be something I'm not used to. I'm used to more curves and, like, you know, sort of kind of more 60s, 70s sort of stuff, but this will be more like, yeah, kind of future cyberpunk sort of stuff, because we got much more angular frame in that. We've got a square chassis, you know, rectangle and square tube and stuff like that. So I think this is going to be an interesting design direction. I got some pretty damn sexy wheels up there ready to roll on it. So yeah, the back one we can't use, so I'll redo that, but the front one I'll definitely be able to use that one on the fork set that I've got. So yeah, I laced all those up a little while ago, so that's good to go. So pretty exciting now. I sort of you know, it was a bit hard there for a bit because I got my ass kicked in a few times on this, and yeah, almost looked like it wasn't possible, but back up to speed again and back on the move. So yeah, between the hours 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. I can do some work on this sucker. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I'll give you an update in the next little while. Cheers, bye.